The 49ers, after a precipitous drop in defensive performance over the course of the 2024 season, will not be retaining Nick Sorensen as their defensive coordinator. They still want Sorensen to remain in the building. We don't know if that's going to happen yet. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch will speak tomorrow. We also know that Nick Sorensen has a year of experience as a special teams coordinator, and that role is also vacant since the 49ers fired Brian Schneider yesterday. But it is official. The 49ers defense and the 49ers special teams, both units that were near or at the bottom of the league during this past miserable season, will have new leadership in 2025. Credit Matt Barrows first with this report. Matt wrote on Twitter, per league source, the 49ers are moving on from Nick Sorensen at defensive coordinator. The team hopes it can retain Sorensen in some capacity. The 49ers have an opening at special teams coordinator, and Sorensen was a special teams coordinator in Jacksonville in 2021. So there you have it. The 49ers, they replaced Sorensen because of this. This is performance of the 49ers defenses ever since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch took over. I'll remove the text title quickly so you could see Robert Saleh on the bottom horizontal key on this chart. In general, you want to be further to the right and further up in these charts. The top right is good. The x-axis is run defense. So the further to the right a coordinator here is, the better their run defense was. The further up a coordinator here is, the better their pass defense was. The pinnacle of the 49ers defensive experience under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch was 2019 and 2022. The 22 defense was ranked number 1 in football, total expected points added, EPA. The 2019 defense was ranked number 2 behind only Bill Belichick's Patriots. Throughout the years, the 49ers have gone through various challenges, including 2020 when a lot of players were hurt, but they've still generally maintained good defenses. It wasn't until this 2024 season that the defense truly languished. Even 2017 and 2018, when the 49ers were still building the program before they drafted Nick Bosa, performed better than this 2024 unit. As you can see, this is the only one in the bottom left quadrant, which means the pass defense was below average, but most alarmingly, the run defense under Nick Sorensen was way below average. The 49ers ranked number 29 in EPA against the run. So this is not ideal. The 49ers are now going to have 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years, and we'll talk about some potential candidates in a few minutes. But first, we have to start with the last 2 defensive coordinators and how Kyle Shanahan has swung and missed on both of them. I'll explain what the thought process was, what the 49ers strategy was, and then we'll theorize about why it didn't work. But after DeMeco Ryans left following the 2022 season, where the 49ers had this defense, the one in the very upper right, alongside the 2019 defense, DeMeco Ryans deserved promotion to Houston's head coach. After DeMeco Ryans left, the 49ers wanted to modernize the defense. I don't think that Kyle Shanahan saw any in-house candidates at the time. He still thought that Nick Sorensen needed a season more of seasoning, but he thought that I'm going to have to go outside the box here. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to bring in some new ideas. So Wilks, who had not been part of the Seattle-style defensive coaching tree before, joined the 49ers, and what Kyle Shanahan told him was, my dad, Mike Shanahan, joined the 49ers back in 1992 as the offensive coordinator. And back then, those were the Bill Walsh affected years. Bill Walsh was no longer the coach. George Seifert was the coach, but he took a lot of Walsh's philosophy running the team and kept it. George Seifert said, I want you to learn our system because our system works really well. And then after you learn all of our system, apply what you want to bring in, and then we'll mold the two together. So that's what Kyle Shanahan told Steve Wilks. The problem is that fit never quite worked. They were excited to try it, but it never quite worked because, I mean, we go back to the Week 7 game against Minnesota in 2023 and the cover 0 call from Wilks right before halftime with only 16, 17 seconds left, gave up a touchdown to Jordan Addison. After the bye week, Kyle Shanahan told Steve Wilks, you've got to move from the press box down to the field. It almost seemed like Kyle Shanahan took the reins of the defense himself, and the 49ers played a little bit better, and then it languished more in the postseason with all the effort issues in the NFC Championship game. The fit was never quite right. And what happened in 2023 is that the 49ers run defense, for the first time since Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch came aboard in 2017, was below average. So they fired Steve Wilks because the defense regressed, especially against the run, to a below average unit. Now, the reason that run defense is so important, especially given what the 49ers do, is it sets up the pass rush. But this is a fundamental football truth. If you're getting backed up in the run game, if you're giving up chunks, and that's at least 4 yards at a time, but possibly even more, and the 49ers ranked number 29 against the run this year, we're giving up more, you're constantly going to face disadvantageous down and distance situations. If it is 2nd and 5 and 3rd and 2 all game long, your pass defense is not going to stand a chance over the long run. And that's what started happening to the 49ers at inopportune moments of 2023. So they fired Steve Wilks when the run defense slid down to number 26. But then things got even worse after they hired Nick Sorensen, and a lot of injuries happened, and nothing really went right for the team on the aggregate this year. The run defense slid from number 26 to number 29. So what we've seen from the 49ers is a 2-year regression, especially in terms of run defense. Wilks' pass defense was the 3rd best behind only 2019 and 2022, as you can see by the vertical height on this chart, the 3rd best since 2017. Sorensen's pass defense, it's mediocre for 49er standards. It's about where the 2021 pass defense was. That team made the NFC Championship game. It's where the 2020 pass defense was. That actually was a decent defense, but with a ton of injuries. It's still better than the bad pass defenses in 17 and 18. I'm not saying that it was good enough, but I'm saying that it was the run defense collapse, and this is something I've been writing about for 2 years now. But I raised alarm bells, I think, for the first time when the 49ers lost to the Cleveland Browns in 2023. And I'm going to continue raising alarm bells until they fix the run defense, which has slid to number 29 in the league. The question moving forward for the 49ers is, where do they go schematically with the defense? We get to talk to Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch tomorrow. And it will be fascinating to see if this is going to be a complete defensive overhaul, or if the 49ers are going to continue trying to make a system that has brought them a lot of success, but also brought them one of their worst failures in 2024. We're going to see if they're going to continue to try to make that system work. When I talk about Steve Wilks joining the 49ers in 2023 and Kyle Shanahan wanting him to take his outside ideas and make them work with the 49ers system, I should mention that the next year, the 49ers, after the failure of Steve Wilks, decided to promote an in-house name in Nick Sorensen, somebody who actually had coached for the Seattle Seahawks. And this defense is descended from the Pete Carroll Seattle Seahawks, the 4-3, cover 3. That's why Richard Sherman came over to help teach the system. They went back to a familiar in-house name in Nick Sorensen. When the out-of-house name didn't work, the 49ers went back to familiarity, and the results got even worse. Now, I understand that there are many mitigating factors here that we have to consider, and that's why this is a decision the 49ers didn't take lightly. And I think that if you rewind 26, 27 days to when the 49ers played the Rams, back then they weren't thinking about replacing Nick Sorensen. So there are a lot of things that happened to make this complicated, a very complicated, very nuanced decision that the 49ers had to make. But at the end of the day, when it gets this much worse in the aggregate, it's a decision that you expect, and it's a decision that the 49ers did make. The offense this year finished ranked number 11 in expected points added per play, so it's still above average out of 32 teams. The defense slid all the way to number 26, and the special teams fell even further to number 32. The 49ers fired the special teams coach, Brian Schneider. I thought that was as close to a no-brainer as you could see, because the special teams was dead last. The film was horrible. The main culprit for the last place ranking was probably Jake Moody and all his missed field goals. But remember that he only started missing field goals in bunches until after his high ankle sprain. And the reason that he sprained his ankle was because the kick coverage was so bad, and he had to go in and try to make a tackle against DJ Dallas, and that is when he sprained his ankle. So inept coverage led to a kicker's injury, and then the kicker's injury led to kicking struggles, and kicking struggles made the special teams lose about 64 expected points over the course of the season, which was the worst in the NFL. So they fired Brian Schneider. Nick Wagner brought that news yesterday, and now they have decided that Nick Sorensen will not return as defensive coordinator because the defense was a little bit better than the special teams, but it still was near the bottom 5 of the league at number 26. Now, I didn't write that they fired Nick Sorensen because when you fire somebody, you want him out the building, off the staff. They still want Nick Sorensen on staff. He has been special teams coordinator for a season. In fact, he actually succeeded Brian Schneider as the special teams coordinator of Jacksonville in 2021. So if the 49ers do move Nick Sorensen to special teams coordinator, that's going to be just a repeat of what happened in 2021 in Jacksonville. Sorensen in the past for the 49ers, before he took the defensive coordinator role, had been the ball father. That's what they called him, the ball father. That means the guy who ran the ball meetings. Every single week, the 49ers have a meeting where they show cut-ups of takeaways around the league, turnovers around the league. They also show cut-ups of how to protect the football so you avoid giveaways. While Nick Sorensen held that role in 2022 and 2023, the 49ers led the league in turnover margin. They were near the top at takeaways. They were actually at the very top in interceptions, and they were near the bottom in giveaways. That's why the 49ers were so damn good in 2022 and 2023. When Nick Sorensen graduated to defensive coordinator in 2024, the 49ers ran into a desert of takeaways. In fact, since the bye week, the 49ers, over 9 games, only forced 2 takeaways. And one of those takeaways was a football essentially slipping out of Caleb Williams' hand. It really wasn't forced by the 49ers. So a team that led the NFL in turnover margin was all of a sudden second from worst in turnover margin over the course of the back half of 2024. I don't know how much of this had to do with Nick Sorensen not being the ball father anymore because he took over defensive coordinator. It's worth noting that Brandon Staley took over Sorensen's old role as the guy who ran those ball meetings. But when I think about a future role for Nick Sorensen, if the 49ers do end up retaining him on this staff, maybe he should go back to his old one because things were working really well in that role. But then we have to say, what are the 49ers going to do in the big picture? And this is the overarching question that I posed a couple minutes ago. The scheme was working really well through 2022. What remained of what the 49ers were running previous to 2023 resurfaced in time for a really good run coming out of the bye week in 2023 after they moved Steve Wilkes down to the field from the booth. But it still wasn't the same as 22. That was a really, really damn good defense. 2024, well, it's really, really tough to pick through the pieces and evaluate just because things were so bad. But there is a school of thought that says the league has figured out what the 49ers are running, at least the front, the wide 9 front, and that's why the run defense is struggling so much. I'm going to be very curious to see the autonomy that the 49ers' new defensive coordinator gets. Is he going to stick with the wide 9? Is he going to have to stick with the wide 9? Sorensen had to stick with the wide 9. He was an in-house promotion. Steve Wilkes had to stick with the wide 9. Kyle Shanahan said, this is the way that we do things in San Francisco. Learn the system, then add your own wrinkles, but you better stick with the fundamentals. Have the 49ers decided to depart from that philosophy given the defensive struggles of this season? They are illustrated here in a different way. This is drop back EPA per play allowed, so pass defense on the x-axis, run defense on the y-axis. As you can see, the run defense, one of the worst in the league. Only 3 teams were worse: the Saints, the Cowboys, and the Carolina Panthers. And the pass defense, well, it was on the bottom half of mediocre for the 49ers, despite the fact that they had some real talent in that defensive backfield. I think that if you want to land a bigger name defensive coordinator, and here are some candidates, you might have to be willing to part with the scheme. if you're the 49ers, because not necessarily this, let me say this, not necessarily this scheme, maybe some of the sub approaches to the scheme, because some of the names on this list have already been coaching the 49ers scheme. So they might actually be able to carry over and continue some of the fundamentals of what they're doing if they do pick up Jeff Ulbrich, or if they do bring back Robert Saleh or Gus Bradley, who actually was the initial coordinator of the Legion of Boom in Seattle, from which this 49ers scheme is descended. Gus Bradley was just fired by the Indianapolis Colts. But some of the other names, Dennis Allen, Matt Eberflus, Lou Anarumo, they've run different types of defenses. And even Ulbrich or Saleh may want to move away from a wide 9 alignment up front. I don't know. This is a big I don't know for me right now. I cannot wait to talk to Lynch and Shanahan about this tomorrow to see exactly what they're thinking about the overarching structure of the 49ers defense. But guys who have not been involved in the 4-3, cover 3, wide 9 that the 49ers are running, and I guess that would be Gus Bradley, Dennis Allen, Matt Eberflus, and Lou Anarumo, and even Jeff Ulbrich. I mean, Saleh ran with the wide 9 in 2019 and 2020, and he obviously saw good results after Chris Kocurek came. But not everybody on this list, and this is a good list of defensive coordinator candidates, has run defense with the specifics that the 49ers have been asking of their coordinators in the past. So it is very possible that San Francisco just scraps everything and goes to a completely clean slate defensively. They were talking with Vic Fangio a couple years ago about their defensive coordinator opening. And Vic Fangio ran a 3-4 for the 49ers back under Jim Harbaugh. So that was from 2011 to 2014. But they never reached an agreement with Vic Fangio. And the reason they might not have reached an agreement is because he might have wanted to do things his way, and the 49ers wanted to absorb him into their system. And Fangio was a 3-4 guy. The 49ers have been running the 4-3 since 2017. There are significant differences as to what you look for personnel-wise between those two schemes, and maybe that's why that marriage was never able to happen. They were able to get Steve Wilkes in the building, but obviously that marriage only lasted a year. And I think in the case of Nick Sorensen, well, it just was too big for him. They thought that he was ready for it, but it ended up being too big for him over the course of this season. There are a couple data points that I think I should really share with you that led to this moment, and I think should arm the 49ers with the knowledge they need as they select their new defensive coordinator and move their defense into 2025 so they hope for better results. And the first one is the 49ers' lack of success when blitzing. 49ers fans, more than anybody, because they saw what Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs did to them in the Super Bowl, should realize that this has turned into a creative blitzing league. There's a lot of cover zero happening right now. There's a lot of creative, exotic pressure coming now from defensive coordinators. It's an arms race in terms of manufactured pressure. You can even bring heavy pressure that overwhelms an offensive line that isn't necessarily heavy enough to compromise your coverages all too greatly if you disguise it correctly. That's what Steve Spagnuolo was able to do to the 49ers. Maybe you could even look at somebody like Brian Flores and his aggressive defense with the Minnesota Vikings that has confused so many offenses over the course of this season. It's been doing that for a while now, but it is a pressure league. The 4-3 that Nick Sorensen has run, and this goes back to most of the defensive coordinators that the 49ers have employed since the Kyle Shanahan era started, doesn't blitz a whole lot. The most successful years that the 49ers have had have featured particularly monstrous defensive lines. So the 49ers out of the wide 9 have been able to generate pressure with the front 4 because their defensive line has had several Ferraris up front. But when that defensive line is not as dominant, and it's hard to maintain a dominant defensive line in a salary-capped league, especially then when you start dealing with a lot of injuries like the 49ers did this season, when that defensive line is not hitting home coming out of the 4-3, you better find new ways to get pressure. And what this data shows us is that the 49ers when they were blitzing, that's the vertical axis, were the second least efficient defense in football. Their blitzes were not effective under Nick Sorensen. You see so many creative pressures. And again, I say the 49ers have been derailed by creative pressures that Steve Spagnuolo has brought. Other opponents have brought creative pressures at good times against the 49ers. I never once felt over the course of this season that the 49ers were delivering creative pressure. In fact, they had only one sack on the whole team in 17 games from somebody that was not a defensive lineman. It was Fred Warner earlier in the year. One sack from all the linebackers and defensive backs combined. The 49ers only blitzed two or more rushers 1.7% of the time, a league low under Nick Sorensen. And when they did that, they were extremely ineffective. So their blitzes, any general blitz was ineffective for the 49ers, but the exotic ones that seem to be making defenses tick these days in the league, because it's hard to have a fully dominant defensive line at all times. It's also hard to have a fully dominant front seven at all times. And the 49ers didn't have Dre Greenlaw this year, so that was an issue as well. But the defenses that are ticking around the league are the ones that are able to bring pressure when they need to, and it is effective more often than not. For comparison, the 49ers, who blitzed only 1.7% of the time this season with two or more men, there were teams that blitzed about 14% of the time with two or more men. So the 49ers were out blitzed at a rate of about 8x this season. And it's not like the 49ers were generating a monstrous pass rush with their front four. They had a decent pass rush with their front four, but Nick Bosa was not playing healthy this season. Javon Hargrave played only 3 games this year, so there was that vacuum again at defensive tackle. No Eric Armstead on this team anymore. Leonard Floyd had a fine year at 8.5 sacks, but nobody's considering him a star edge rusher. So the 40 and Yetur Gross-Matos, who probably was the third best edge rusher on this football team, also missed significant time, and it took him a while to get acclimated to the system. So what you had was a defense that wasn't great personnel-wise because they had been decimated by all these injuries, and they really needed some creativity from their coordinator to pick up the slack with some of the pressure. And Nick Sorensen was not able to do that. That's why I say that he just was not ready for the moment, because they needed more blitzing. You saw it against the Detroit Lions. But whenever they did blitz, the Lions were actually even more efficient than when they didn't blitz. And that means that the blitzes that Sorensen did dial up were ineffective. So where do the 49ers go from here? Let's go back to the candidate list here for San Francisco. Ulbrich, interim head coach of the New York Jets, who are currently looking for a new head coach. So he will not be the head coach of the New York Jets. Jeff Ulbrich grew up in San Jose, is a former 49er, linebacker back in the day of those glorious in-between uniforms. That's what I call them. Back when they went away from the triple stripe, the 2 red stripes and the white stripe, the uniforms that they wore when Steve Young threw the catch to Terrell Owens. So we're talking about late 90s, early 2000s. So Ulbrich was a player back then, and he was the defensive coordinator under Robert Saleh in New York after Saleh left from the 49ers to the Jets in 2021. The Jets defense was constantly at the top of the league while Ulbrich was the defensive coordinator. The Jets defense, though, fell off a cliff this year, but maybe that was because Robert Saleh was fired and that team was just a hot, dysfunctional mess. And it has been a hot, dysfunctional mess under this current ownership. But there was a drop-off with New York's defensive play, and that's something that the 49ers, if they do interview Jeff Ulbrich, who I think they were interested in last year, so he's definitely a candidate. If they do interview him, that's a drop-off that's going to have to be reconciled in their minds. Robert Saleh, well, that might seem like a simple solution to a lot of people, because the last time the 49ers saw Robert Saleh, their defense was really good. 2020, even with a lot of injuries, he kept that defense afloat. He inherited the 2017 and 2018 49ers, and despite the fact that they were very bereft of talent in those years, maintained a good run defense and gave the 49ers a fighting chance despite the lack of personnel. Then he took it to new heights in 2019. Is Robert Saleh going to walk back through that door? I'm not sure. He's really good buddies with Matt LaFleur. That's why he's doing some consulting now for the Green Bay Packers. He's some kind of advisor for the Green Bay Packers. He's on their staff, but I don't know if that's going to last more than a year. I would think that Saleh might want to get back into the coaching game. And if he wants to work under Kyle Shanahan again, if he likes what the 49ers are working with defensively, maybe Robert Saleh does walk back through that door. We shall see. Other candidates for San Francisco to consider. This is the top of the list, and we know that they've been interested in Gus Bradley before. When we talk about Saleh coming from Seattle in 2017, Gus Bradley was in Seattle before him from 2009 to 2012. That was the infancy of the Legion of Boom. Bradley then went to Jacksonville, and Dan Quinn took his role as the defensive coordinator of the Seahawks in 2013. That was their best year defensively. But the initial seeds there were planted by Gus Bradley, who was just fired by the Indianapolis Colts. So the fact that Kyle Shanahan has been interested in linking up with Gus Bradley in the past should definitely be considered as pertinent information now. Then there is Dennis Allen. Now, this is really, really interesting. Allen has not been a good head coach in his NFL career, but he has been a solid defensive coordinator. And the Saints just let go of him. He was there from 2022 to 2024. So he's going to be a free agent in the coaching marketplace. And it's going to be really interesting to see if the 49ers might be interested in bringing in a bigger name who has been a head coach that comes from outside the system. There's a little bit of coaching familiarity through the fact that Dennis Allen worked with Clint Kubiak this year. That was the former 49ers passing game coordinator who became the Saints offensive coordinator. In the past, Dennis Allen was the defensive coordinator of the Denver Broncos. That was in 2011. He went to the Raiders from 2012 to 2014 to be their head coach. That stint did not work out. And then he went to the Saints to become their defensive coordinator from 2015 until 2021. There were some good Saints defenses over 15 to 2021. 49ers played against some of those defenses over the years. So Dennis Allen knows what he's doing as a DC. It would be a departure from the immediate coaching family, but maybe that's what the 49ers need at this moment in time after their defense has slid to the worst levels of the Shanahan-Lynch regime. Then there is Matt Eberflus. Matt Eberflus was just fired during the season, mid-season, as the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Previously, had been with the Indianapolis Colts as the defensive coordinator. And the 49ers, there was some crossover history there too between the 49ers facing Eberflus. I remember the 2021 rain game. That was an ugly game at Levi's Stadium that the 49ers played against Indianapolis, and they really, really struggled to move the football. I know that it was a really wet game, and the conditions probably had a lot to do with the 49ers struggles, but I do think that Kyle Shanahan left that game with some respect for what Eberflus was running in Indianapolis. Prior to there, he was with the Dallas Cowboys as a linebackers coach and the Cleveland Browns as a linebackers coach, a defensive coordinator at the college ranks before that at Missouri for Matt Eberflus. So I think that he'd be more of a peripheral candidate, but he is an ex-head coach who's going to be a free agent. And as you can see here, the list is, I think, exceptional this season. And the 49ers had to make sure that they would be able to make a definite improvement. They had to know where they were going before they parted ways with Sorensen at defensive coordinator and scheduled a press conference tomorrow. And this entire list, which is rounded out by Lou Anarumo, the former defensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals, who never quite had a great pool of talent to work with. This is as good of a list as you might find over the course of an offseason. And I don't think that it's complete. If you have a preferred candidate, go ahead and add him to the comment section, a preferred candidate who's not here. If you want either Ulbrich, Saleh, Bradley, Allen, Eberflus, or Anarumo, you can also include that in the comment section. Anyway, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch speak tomorrow at 11:30. We're going to learn a lot more about the thinking, and this is going to fascinate me. I can't wait to see what the larger picture plan for this defense is Maybe the 49ers are going to go through an entire overhaul. That would give us a lot to analyze this offseason. I don't know exactly what the right answer is. I see the debates online. I see people talking about, abandon the wide nine. But the 49ers have seen their greatest success with the wide nine. I get it. The wide nine is extremely personnel reliant, but the NFL is personnel reliant. The wide nine, though, requires super fueled Ferraris, especially at that defensive tackle position, to command space, command that extra gap in between the linemen so that you're not gashed by the run game. And it requires really good linebacker play. Just as important, the linebacker play is absolutely essential. And I think that 49ers didn't do Nick Sorensen many favors this year. The injury luck didn't do him many favors this year. Obviously, they didn't have Dre Greenlaw outside of 34 snaps sprinkled over 2 games. Nick Bosa played hurt this season. As I mentioned, Javon Hargrave wasn't out on the field. They had real growing pains at the safety position this season. Jair Brown, I think, had a down year for the 49ers. I mean, it was tough for San Francisco personnel-wise. But ultimately, despite the fact that they did put it together in that game against the Rams on Thursday night when they finally had a lot of players back, Nick Bosa was in the lineup, Dre Greenlaw was back, Talanoa Hufanga was back. Even though they did put it together in little blips, in little spurts, they completely fell off a cliff over the final 3 weeks of the regular season. And again, 26 days ago, coming out of that game against the Rams, I don't think the 49ers were going to make a move, a defensive coordinator, nor should they have made a move. I mean, it looked like things were headed in the right direction. Remember, they were 2 dropped interceptions away, or 1 dropped interception. They had 2 really clear opportunities. They had some pick opportunities there to just put the Rams away early in that game, and they didn't do it. But despite the fact that that was a good performance, the 49ers, after they were eliminated, delivered 3 of the worst defensive performances, especially the final 2 that we've seen from this team. They allowed over 38 points per game and over 150 rushing yards per game over the final 3, which is atrocious. Just can't happen in the National Football League. It seemed that they had waved the white flag. Nick Bosa in the locker room was talking about how embarrassing the product was. Fred Warner agreed with him. They were getting pushed back. They weren't tackling well. They weren't stopping the run, which sunk to number 29. And that's just the kind of energy you can't carry with you into an NFL offseason. So whatever Nick Sorensen was doing right to get some of the better results early in the season, and whatever the reasons for the struggles were, such as the game against Seattle at home, and they were shutting Seattle down, but then Nick Bosa got hurt, and the Seahawks took off and beat the 49ers. Despite all that, the large picture here ended up being an ugly one for the 49ers. And you've got to be able to bind things together at a respectable clip, just like the 2020 Niners did with Robert Saleh. He was able to keep things bound together so the 49ers finished respectably on defense. This 2024 unit, giving up 38 points per game over the final 3, over 150 rushing yards per game over the final 3, was not respectable down the stretch. And that's why the 49ers did move on from Nick Sorensen. Now the next question is, will Dre Greenlaw be back next year? They have him under contract until March. It's not like he can go and sign with another team now. Once we learn the answers of who's going to be the next defensive coordinator, what's going to be the next defensive philosophy, I think we'll be in a much better position to start appraising which players might fit and which players won't for the 49ers. These are uncharted, exciting times under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch because, again, they've stuck with the same defensive scheme or at least forced out-of-house additions like Steve Wilks to adopt the new scheme at every single coaching change in the past, from Saleh to Ryans, from Ryans to Steve Wilks, and then from Steve Wilks to Nick Sorensen. Tomorrow, maybe we'll learn that the 49ers are going in a complete different direction, and it's going to be interesting to see what exactly that direction is. Today, this morning, up on the San Francisco Standard, I wrote this, the full recap of the 49ers 2024 season. I'm glad that I was able to put a bow on 2024 before all this madness started today. We were waiting for word from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. We now have it, and now we will wait further for their explanations during the end of season press conference tomorrow. But this makes it a good time to look at the piece that I wrote up on the Standard. I'm going to go ahead and send it over to Mike. Tell Mike to toss this into the description, because a lot of you are watching right now. So I think it's a perfect time for you guys to sign up for the Standard. This is the ultimate piece. And I write a lot of these long form pieces with great photos, by the way, taking a look at 10 moments of this 49ers 2024 calendar year that set them up for the very, very disappointing 6-11 finish. I think it's really important to read and understand the full context behind everything, ending with the Deebo Samuel drop, which was the straw that broke the camel's back. Because if you understand the totality of things and you understand where the special teams slid, you understand what exactly was the fracture point of the defense, and then you understand why the superstars did not play their A games this year and why they are projected to be a lot better next year. If you understand the big picture, then I think that you're most ready for all the coverage heading into 2025. So it's the 10 moments when the 49ers season fell apart, and we would all appreciate your support. You can click on the link in the description of this video. Go ahead and sign up for the San Francisco Standard. There is a lot going on in 49ers land right now. This is a team that's retooling its roster, retooling its coaching staff, licking its wounds after a tough 6-11 season. But perspective must be maintained. They were in the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl in 4 of the previous 5 seasons. And they still have a lot of the superstars on the roster that help propel those runs. With a last place schedule coming up in 2025, I think the 49ers firmly believe that making the right tweaks now and the right changes at the top of the power structure can get them into position to head back to the playoffs and maybe even the Super Bowl, which is going to be at Levi's Stadium next year. All right, I'm going to answer a few questions. Let's go to the 49ers Q&A. People saying Brian Flores, but Brian Flores is under contract in Minnesota. You can't just grab defensive coordinators that are under contract with other teams, especially other teams who are coming off of good years. It's not like Minnesota is just going to let him leave. Richard says the 49ers need to retain Dre Greenlaw and Charvarius Ward as well. Well, you know, it's a salary capped league, and that means that you can't keep everybody, especially since you had to pay Brandon Ayuk last year and Brock Purdy is going to be coming up. You can't let that sink overflow. Are they going to be able to get those players at a relative discount? Maybe. They're both coming off of down years. Dre Greenlaw only played 34 snaps, but I don't think it seems likely on the surface that they'll be able to keep both of them, and it may be unlikely that they keep only one of them. So the NFL is a transitory league. You don't keep everybody every single year. You're going to have to figure out where it works and where it doesn't. And at this very moment, we don't even know what scheme the 49ers will be running next year. So I don't think that it's all too wise to speculate at this point about who they're going to keep and who they're not going to keep. We'll learn a lot more from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch tomorrow. Chris Richards and DeAnthony Lynn are 2 young, smart candidates. There you go. Possibilities there for the 49ers. If they want to go to fresher blood on that defensive side of the ball, I don't know. I don't know where the 49ers are. The 49ers did not approach Jeff Ulbrich last year. They were interested in Jeff Ulbrich, but he was under contract with the Jets. They couldn't tamper. They might have approached the Jets. They might have said, hey, what would it take to release Jeff Ulbrich from his contract so he could come here? But the Jets weren't interested in helping out the 49ers because Ulbrich was their own defensive coordinator. But yes, there was interest there last year. Somebody like Jim Schwartz is currently with the Cleveland Browns. So Daniel says, yeah, I mean, not everybody's a candidate, guys. A coach has to be available, not be under contract with another team so that the 49ers can actually hire him without permission from that other team. Very often another team wouldn't be interested in letting a coach leave for a lateral move to San Francisco. Would Brandon Staley be a candidate? I don't think so, especially if he was in any way involved with the big-time defensive regression of this season. Then I wouldn't think so. I would think that the 49ers go in a different direction. But this is intel that we'll have to pick up from Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch tomorrow. Will I follow up on the Greenlaw news? Yeah, of course. I've been following up on it ever since the family members started posting. That was Sydney Warner, Fred Warner's wife, posting. And then the comment came in from Dre Greenlaw's fiance that she's praying that he stays in San Francisco. It's all going to come down to business. And I think that we also need to figure out what exactly the 49ers will be running on defense next year. Mike wants to know if the 49ers make any coaching changes on offense. It's a good question. And that's a good one for Kyle Shanahan tomorrow. It's going to be interesting to see exactly where Kyle Shanahan thinks some things went wrong this year outside of the injuries. Listen, the 49ers finished last in average separation at the time of completion. That usually goes back to personnel beating man coverage, and they were missing Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey for most of the season. So it became a lot harder to scheme offensively. That's the one data point that really stuck out offensively. And they weren't terrible on the offensive side of the ball. That's another thing to remember. Number 11 on offense, number 26 on defense, number 32 on special teams. One above average unit, two below average units. They fired or they removed the leadership of the two below average units. Offense, I mean, a number 11 EPA finish, even with so many injuries, was actually respectable this year. But I don't think that it was Kyle Shanahan's best year by any stretch. He finished ranked low on those play caller rankings. I would advise Kyle Shanahan to make sure that he has somebody giving him big picture analysis during the game so he doesn't get lost in the weeds. Maybe that's Clay Kubiak, who called plays for the 49ers on Sunday in Arizona. But what happened against Detroit, I don't think is acceptable for the 49ers. They ran the ball 0 times over their last 16 snaps of the game. 16 straight passes for San Francisco. 10 straight led to Brock Purdy's second interception. I get it. As a head coach and the chaos of the sideline, looking at your play sheet, penalties are being called, flags are flying. It can be easy to lose track of how many straight times you passed the ball. But the defense knows that you've been passing the ball 10 straight times. The safeties know. Kirby Joseph knew on that night. And you start zeroing in on the quarterback's eyes. You start not respecting the play action. It's exactly what happened when the 49ers played the Lions, and it led to the interception. Balance is so important, and maintaining a big picture outlook as the play caller so that you don't stray away from that balance is so important. And I think that's what Kyle Shanahan could most use on the offensive side of the ball so the 49ers avoid the slide that they suffered in that game against the Lions. We got a special teams super chat. Thank you. Belichick and Walsh were obsessed with all three phases. Kyle needs to take special teams and defense more seriously. That's why he hasn't won the Super Bowl yet. Not all about offense. Well, I think Kyle's obsessed with defense as well. I mean, he's taken defense seriously. Look, the 49ers have had some really good defenses under Kyle Shanahan. The really good defenses are in the upper right. Special teams, I agree with you. Special teams, I think, do need to be taken more seriously because what the 49ers put on tape this year was absolutely embarrassing. Look at this. This is from SF Data Niners. This was the 49ers special teams performance this year. They lost 63.8 expected points. 64 points through special teams play alone. Just terrible. Unacceptable. Whatever you want to call it. It wasn't good for San Francisco. So they lost all of this value on special teams, which was literally the difference between a negative point differential and a positive point differential. And it was the worst mark in the entire NFL over the past 4 years. And the special teams coordinator that they didn't retain after 2021, Richard Hightower, coordinated the number 5 special teams unit in the league with the Chicago Bears, which tells you that this is an organizational problem, the special team struggles. Brian Schneider was a good coach for the Seattle Seahawks. They had top 5 special teams units multiple times. So yes, Kyle Shanahan, I think one of the retooling introspection goals of this offseason needs to be special teams can't screw things up. And maybe the way that you get there is to stop thinking in terms of just don't screw things up and start thinking aggressively on special teams. Start thinking about how can special teams help you win games? Because the comment was correct. Bill Belichick and Bill Walsh, both of those guys were obsessed with special teams. Yeah, the Jacksonville Jaguars were not good in Nick Sorensen's year as special teams coordinator there. That is worth noting. I personally think they need to bring in outside name at special teams coordinator, outside name at defensive coordinator, and see if they can retain Nick Sorensen on the staff as the ball father, back into his ball meetings. The guy that is focused on takeaways and giveaways. I thought he did an awesome job in that role. The 49ers and Sorensen were all really proud of it, and they were at the top of the league in turnover margin. They've dropped to almost the bottom of the league over the back half of the season. So maybe that's where, if you can retain Nick Sorensen on staff, you'll want to keep him. In summary today, the 49ers, they're not going to bring back Nick Sorensen as defensive coordinator. Thanks to Matt Barrows for that report. The candidates to replace him, well, this is just a partial list, but there you have them. Ulbrich, Sala, Bradley, Dennis Allen, Matt Eberflus, Lou Anarumo, formerly of the Bengals. This is why they didn't hold on to Nick Sorensen. The run defense regression to X-axis, staggering for San Francisco. The run defense got way, way worse. Tomorrow at 11:30, we find out what John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan think of all this. Will they overhaul the entire defense? Are they going to go to familiar face? How's that going to work with the personnel turnover that we expect during the offseason retool? We are sailing into uncharted waters. So follow along here. Sign up for the San Francisco Standard. Again, my big season postmortem article is up. You get humbled quick, the 10 precise moments when the 49ers season fell apart. Go and click on that right now in the description and enjoy. Got one. I'll answer one or two more questions before we get going. Let's reopen this to 49ers Q&A. Where's my Q&A? There it is. See, a lot of people are having fun with the Brandon Staley rumor that was probably started in the comment section itself. Joe Judge for special teams. That would be an interesting one. Joe Judge was Bill Belichick's special teams coordinator back in the day. Also has head coaching experience. Not sure where he's at right now. There is no real rumor. It's just people in the comment section laughing about the possibility, which I don't think is a possibility, but we'll see, of Brandon Staley at defensive coordinator. People are talking about the franchise tag for Dre Greenlaw. Everybody, please calm down. We don't even know what scheme the 49ers are going to run defensively at next season. Let's cross the Dre Greenlaw bridge when we get to it. He remains under contract for the 49ers through March. Andrew, what about Brad Seeley? He was the great special teams coordinator for the 49ers back when the special teams truly was great. The Tony Montana squad under Jim Harbaugh. This show is sponsored by Rocket Money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/gameon today. That's rocketmoney.com/gameon. rocketmoney.com/gameon. Everybody, thanks for watching. This has been a fun show. 49ers have officially decided that Nick Sorensen will not return as their defensive coordinator. Glad that we got to discuss all the ins and outs of this San Francisco defense and the possibilities moving forward. Everybody take care and stay tuned. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch press conference is going to be happening tomorrow at 11:30 Pacific time. At that point, we'll know much more about the 49ers' future plans.